The bright blue glow from the holographic screen lit up Detective Ji-ho Park's tired face. She sat in her office at the Interplanetary Criminal Investigation Bureau, known as ICIB for short. The time was 3 a.m. Earth Standard Time, but in space, time didn't mean much anymore. Not when you were tracking a killer across 3 different worlds. Ji-ho rubbed her eyes and looked at the pictures floating in the air before her. 3 victims, 3 different places, 3 perfect crimes. She touched the first image, and it grew larger. Dr. Nam-woo Kim, a quantum physicist from Mars Colony, found 2 weeks ago in a stasis pod. His body was perfectly preserved, but his mind was empty. All his memories, knowledge, and thoughts had been erased, leaving only the basic functions that kept him breathing. The second image showed Dr. Hai-Jin Lee, a hydroponics engineer from Europa Station. Same scenario, found in a stasis pod, body intact, mind wiped clean. The third victim was Dr. Ta-Sung Cho, a terraforming specialist from Titan Base. Again, the same method was used. What connects you 3? Ji-ho asked the floating images. She had asked this question 100 times over the past 2 weeks. The victims didn't know each other. They had never met, never worked together, never even exchanged messages. The only thing they had in common was their work. Each one helped humanity survive in space. The soft whoosh of the office door made Ji-ho look up. Han Bin walked in, carrying 2 cups of real coffee, a luxury in space. Han Bin had been Ji-ho's assistant for 3 years, and he knew she only drank real coffee when she was truly stuck on a case. "You should sleep," Han Bin said, placing 1 cup on her desk. The steam rose and mixed with the blue light of the holograms, creating an eerie effect. "Sleep can wait," Ji-ho replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "Did you find anything in the old FBI files?" Han Bin's face lit up. He pulled out his data pad and waved it at the holographic display. New images appeared next to the victims, old crime scene photos from Earth, dating back to the time before humanity spread to the stars. 3 unsolved cases, Han Bin explained, his voice getting excited. All from different decades, all involving brilliant victims, and all cases where the killer was never caught. The FBI's best agents couldn't solve these cases. Ji-ho leaned forward, her dark eyes scanning the old photos. The first showed a crime scene from 2025, perfectly arranged like an architect's blueprint. The second was from 2035, with binary codes somehow carved into the victim. The third, from 2045, showed a victim in what the old reports called a quantum state. "Look at this," Han Bin said, pulling up more data. Each of these old killers had a signature, a way of showing off their intelligence. The blueprint killer arranged his scenes like complex building plans. The binary butcher left coded messages. The quantum killer created crime scenes that seemed to break the laws of physics. Ji-ho stood up and walked to the window. The massive space station, they were on orbited Earth, giving her a perfect view of humanity's homeworld. Somewhere down there, decades ago, 3 killers had outsmarted the FBI. Now someone was copying their methods, but with modern technology. "Han Bin," she said slowly, "pull up everything we have on stasis pod technology. Who makes them? Who can modify them?" Han Bin's fingers flew over his datapad. Standard stasis pods are made by 5 companies. But these pods... He paused, double-checking his data. "These pods are custom-built. They're more advanced than anything on the market." Ji-ho turned back to the holograms. "So our killer not only knows about these old Earth cases, but also understands advanced biotechnology. They're taking old methods and updating them for the space age." A message alert flashed across the holographic display. Ji-ho's heart sank as she read it. Another victim had been found, this time on Mercury Base. Dr. Young-ho Ba, a radiation shield specialist. "Call Mars Colony Security," Ji-ho ordered, already moving to gather her things. Tell them Detective Min Seo Kang needs to meet me at Mercury Base. And get us a fast ship. We need to be there in 6 hours. As Han Bin rushed out to make arrangements, Ji-ho looked one last time at the floating images. 4 victims now, all experts in space survival technology. All found in impossible stasis pods. All with their minds wiped clean. The old FBI cases had gone unsolved because the technology needed to catch the killers hadn't existed yet. But now, with humanity spread across the solar system, with technology that would seem like magic to the FBI agents of the past, Ji-ho had a chance to solve not just one case but 4. Maybe even more. She grabbed her jacket and her neural link communicator. The killer was smart, maybe smarter than anyone she had hunted before. They understood technology that shouldn't exist yet. They knew about cases from Earth's past that few people remembered. And they were targeting the very people who made human life in space possible. As Ji-ho walked to the station's ship dock, her mind was already racing ahead. The killer had made one mistake. They had assumed that spreading their crimes across different worlds would make them harder to solve. But humanity had evolved. Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, Mercury. They weren't separate worlds anymore. They were all part of humanity's territory now. And Ji-ho was about to prove that in space, there was nowhere to hide. The ship was ready when she arrived. As she strapped into her seat and felt the engines power up, Ji-ho thought about the old FBI agents who had tried to solve the original cases. They had failed because they didn't have the tools, the technology, or the understanding of what they were really dealing with. But she did, and she was going to succeed where they had failed. The ship lifted off, its powerful engines pushing them away from the station. Through the viewport, Ji-ho watched Earth grow smaller. Somewhere ahead of them, Mercury Base waited, and with it, another crime scene, another victim, and hopefully, more clues. This wasn't just about catching a killer anymore. This was about protecting humanity's future among the stars. And Ji-ho Park was not going to let anyone threaten that future, no matter how smart they thought they were. As the ship accelerated toward Mercury, Ji-ho opened the case files on her neural link. She had 6 hours to study everything again, to look for patterns she might have missed. 6 hours to prepare for whatever she would find at Mercury Base. 6 hours to try to get inside the mind of a killer who seemed to know more about space technology than even the experts they were targeting. The hunt was on, and this time, the killer wouldn't be outsmarting anyone. Not if Detective Ji-ho Park had anything to say about it. The ship landed on Mercury Base with a gentle thud. Detective Ji-ho Park unbuckled her safety harness and stood up, her legs slightly shaky from the 6-hour journey. Mercury Base was the newest of humanity's space colonies, built underground to protect it from the planet's extreme temperatures. The base was crucial. It provided rare metals needed for building spaceships and space stations. Detective Min Seo Kang was waiting at the airlock. She was tall for a Korean woman, with short black hair and the strong muscles typical of someone who grew up in Mars' lower gravity. She had worked with Ji-ho before, and they made a good team. The victim is exactly like the others, Min Seo said as they walked through the base's main tunnel. Dr. Young-ho Bao, found in a stasis pod in his lab. Body perfectly preserved, mind completely empty. Ji-ho nodded, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. Show me the old case files first. I want to compare them to what we're seeing here. They entered the base's security office. Min Seo brought up the historical records on the room's holographic display. The image of Do-Yun Lee, known as the Blueprint Killer, floated before them. Back in 2025, Min Seo explained, Do-Yun Lee killed 7 architects and designers. He posed their bodies in perfect geometric patterns, like human blueprints. The FBI's best agents couldn't figure out how he moved the bodies without leaving any traces. It was like he could control gravity itself. Ji-ho studied the old crime scene photos. The victims had been arranged in complex patterns that, when viewed from above, looked like building plans. But these weren't normal buildings. They were designs for structures that shouldn't have been possible with 2025 technology. "Look at this pattern," Ji-ho said, pointing to one photo. The FBI thought it was just a strange design. But now, she pulled up a schematic of Mercury Base next to the old photo. The patterns matched perfectly. Min Seo's eyes widened. That's impossible. Mercury Base wasn't built until 2070. How could a killer from 2025 know what it would look like? The same way they know how to build advanced stasis pods, Ji-ho said quietly. They have knowledge they shouldn't have. Knowledge from the future. They walked to Dr. Bo's lab, where the latest victim had been found. The stasis pod still hummed softly in the corner. It looked simple on the outside, just a smooth metal cylinder with a clear top. But Ji-ho knew the technology inside was more advanced than anything humanity had created so far. "Have you opened it?" Ji-ho asked, walking around the pod. Min Seo shook her head. "We wanted to wait for you, but we did scan it. The pod's power source. It's like nothing we've seen before. It could keep someone in stasis for hundreds of years." Ji-ho pressed her hand against the pod's surface. It was cool to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly. She pulled out a scanner and began taking readings. "The killer is copying Do-Hyun Lee's method," she said as she worked. "But they're using space-age technology to do it. Instead of arranging bodies in patterns, they're arranging their victims' neural patterns. The stasis pods aren't just preserving them, they're reorganizing their minds." Han Bin's voice came through Ji-ho's neural link communicator. "Detective Park, I found something in the FBI's genetic database about Do-Hyun Lee. His DNA showed some unusual patterns, mutations that help humans survive in space. But those mutations weren't supposed to appear in humans until after we started living in space colonies." Ji-ho looked at Dr. Ba through the pod's clear top. He appeared to be sleeping peacefully, but his mind was empty, wiped clean like a computer's hard drive. What patterns had the killer written in that blank space? "Min Seo," Ji-ho said, "I need you to get me everything you can about Mercury Base's construction. Building plans, design changes, everything. And I need to know if Dr. Ba was working on any modifications to the base's structure." As Min Seo left to gather the information, Ji-ho continued studying the pod. The technology was familiar somehow, but she couldn't place why. It was like seeing a more advanced version of something she used every day. Hours passed as Ji-ho and Min Seo went through the base's records. Dr. Ba had been working on a new type of radiation shielding, something that would let humans work on Mercury's surface. His designs were revolutionary. They would change how humanity built structures in space. "Is something strange," Min Seo said, pointing to the screen. A week before he died, Dr. Bai reported seeing someone in his lab late at night. Someone who looked exactly like Do-Hyun Lee. Ji-ho sat up straight. But Do-Hyun Lee disappeared in 2026. Even if he was still alive, he'd be over 70 years old. Exactly. But Dr. Ba described him as looking young, maybe 30 years old. He said the man seemed to know everything about his research, asking questions about things Dr. Ba hadn't even published yet. Ji-ho walked back to the stasis pod. The technology, the impossible knowledge of future buildings, the mutations in Do-Hyun Lee's DNA. It all pointed to something that seemed impossible. But in space, she had learned that impossible things happened every day. "The killer isn't copying Do-Hyun Lee," she said slowly. "They're not copying any of the old killers. They are the old killers. Somehow, they're moving through time, learning humanity's secrets, planning something we can't understand yet." Min Seo looked skeptical. "Time travel? That's impossible." 20 years ago, people said living on Mercury was impossible. Ji-ho replied. 50 years ago, they said the same thing about Mars. We keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Why not time? She touched her neural link, connecting to Han Bin back at ICRB headquarters. Han Bin, I need you to look for something specific in the old FBI files. Look for any mentions of strange technology, anything the agents couldn't explain, and check if anyone ever found Du Yunli's body. While they waited for Han Bin's response, Ji-ho and Min Seo examined Dr. Bo's lab. His computer showed he had been working late the night he disappeared. His last entries were about a breakthrough in his radiation shield design. Detective Park, Han Bin's voice came through the neural link. I found something. The FBI never found Du Yunli's body because there was no body to find. According to the reports, witnesses saw him simply vanish into thin air during his last known attack. And at each crime scene, agents found traces of radiation they couldn't identify. Ji-ho looked at the stasis pod again. The soft hum it made reminded her of something. The sound of a ship's faster-than-light drive powering up. Both technologies broke the normal rules of space and time. We need to get this pod back to ICRB headquarters, she decided. If we can understand how it works, maybe we can predict where, and when, the killer will strike next. As they arranged for the pod's transport, Ji-ho couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something obvious. The killer or killers weren't just attacking random scientists. They were targeting specific people, gathering specific knowledge. But for what purpose? The answer had to be in the patterns. The blueprint killer's crime scenes that matched future buildings. The binary butcher's code that no one could crack. The quantum killer's impossible physics. They weren't just showing off their intelligence. They were leaving a message spread across time itself. Ji-ho looked out the base's observation window at Mercury's stark landscape. Somewhere out there, moving through time like it was just another dimension of space, was a killer with impossible knowledge and unknown goals. And somehow she had to stop them before they could complete whatever plan they had been working on for the past 50 years. The pod was loaded onto their ship, secured in the cargo hold. As they prepared for launch, Ji-ho reviewed everything they had learned. The killer had knowledge from the future. They could move through time. They were targeting scientists who were advancing humanity's presence in space. And they were using technology that humanity wouldn't develop for decades or even centuries. Min Seo, Ji-ho said as they strapped into their seats, I want you to come back to ICRB headquarters with us. We need to compare notes with the Europa and Titan investigators. There's a pattern here, something bigger than just these murders, and we need to find it before the killer strikes again. As their ship lifted off from Mercury base, Ji-ho thought about Du Yunli and his impossible blueprints. He hadn't just been showing what buildings would look like in the future. He had been showing humanity's path to the stars, written in the language of death and destruction. Now, 50 years later, that path was becoming clear. But was humanity ready for where it led? And more importantly, could they stop whatever plan had been set in motion half a century ago? The ship accelerated away from Mercury, carrying its dangerous cargo. In the hold, the stasis pod continued its soft humming, its advanced technology waiting to reveal its secrets. And somewhere in time and space, a killer watched and waited, their plan unfolding across decades like a blueprint for humanity's future. The ICIB headquarters buzzed with activity as scientists examined the stasis pod from Mercury base. Detective Ji-ho Park watched through a thick glass window as they worked. Next to her stood Min Seo Kang from Mars Colony and the newly arrived Captain Ki Tae-yoon from Europa Station Security. The pod's technology is like nothing we've ever seen, one of the scientists reported through the intercom. It's as if someone took our current stasis technology and advanced it by 100 years. Ji-ho turned to Captain Yoon. Tell us about your victims on Europa. How do they connect to the binary butcher case? Keitel pulled up his files on the wall screen. Images appeared showing 3 victims found on Europa Station over the past year. Each was discovered in a stasis pod, just like Dr. Bao. Sun Mai Choi, the binary butcher, killed 5 computer programmers in 2035, Keita explained. She carved binary code into their bodies, ones and zeros that made no sense to FBI code breakers. She disappeared after leaving a final message that said, "See you in the stars." Han Bin's voice came through their neural links. "Detective Park, I found something interesting about Sun Mai Choi. Like Du Yun Lee, she had genetic mutations that helped with space survival. But there's more. Her binary code wasn't random. When we run it through modern quantum computers, it shows plans for space station technology we're only now developing." Jaiho walked closer to the wall screen, studying the images. The binary butcher wasn't just killing people. She was storing information in their deaths, information that wouldn't make sense until humanity developed the right technology to read it. Min Seo pointed to one of the Europa victims. Dr. Seo Jin Bai was working on new computer systems for deep space communications when she died. The killer wiped her mind clean, just like the others. Not wiped, Jiho corrected. Rewritten. The killer is writing something in their victims' neural patterns, just like Sun Mai Choi wrote in binary code. We just don't know how to read it yet. The scientists in the other room called for their attention. They had found something in the stasis pod's control system. Jiho, Min Seo, and Keita hurried into the lab, putting on protective suits before approaching the pod. "Look at this," the lead scientist said, pointing to a small screen on the pod. Symbols flashed across it, changing too fast for human eyes to read. It's binary code, but it's being processed at quantum speeds. The pod isn't just preserving the victim, it's using their brain as a quantum computer. Jaiho felt a chill run down her spine. "Can you slow down the symbols? Show us what they're saying." The scientist typed commands into his computer. The symbols on the pod screen slowed until they could read them. The binary code translated into words. The message spreads across time. Each death is a letter. Each mind is a page. The book is almost complete. "Check the other pods," Jiho ordered. "The ones from Europa Station and Titan Base. They must have similar messages." As the scientists worked, Jiho connected to Han Bin through her neural link. "Han Bin, I need everything you can find about Sun Mai Choi's victims. What were they working on when they died? What kind of computers did they use? And most importantly, did anyone ever find her body?" "Already looking," Han Bin replied. "And you're not going to believe this. Sun Mai Choi's last victim was found with a strange device surgically implanted in their brain. The FBI couldn't figure out what it was, but looking at it now. Detective Park, it was a primitive version of our neural link technology. She was experimenting with direct brain-to-computer connections 40 years before we invented them. In the lab, the scientists had managed to access the other pod's control systems. Similar messages appeared on their screens, each written in binary code. The pages are scattered across space and time. When humanity learns to read, they will understand. The truth cannot be changed, only prepared for." Keita studied the messages with a frown. "These pods aren't murder weapons. They're some kind of storage devices. The killer is preserving information in their victims' minds, spreading it across different times and places. But why?" Min Seo asked. "Why not just write the information down? Why kill people to store it?" Jaivo thought about the 3 historical killers. The blueprint killer who showed future buildings, the binary butcher who wrote code that predicted future technology, and the quantum killer who created impossible crime scenes. Each one had knowledge they shouldn't have had, and each one found a way to preserve that knowledge until humanity was ready for it. Because information written on paper can be lost or destroyed, Jiho said slowly. But information written in deaths, in murders that shocked the world and puzzled the FBI, that information gets preserved. People study it, copy it, keep it safe in secure databases. The killer isn't just storing information, they're making sure it survives until it's needed. A loud beeping came from the pod they had brought from Mercury Base. The scientists jumped back as new symbols appeared on its screen, flashing urgently. The translation appeared on their computers. The final page approaches. The book must be completed before they arrive. Before who arrives? Kita asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout ICRB headquarters. Han Bin's voice came through their neural links, sounding panicked. Detective Park. We just got reports from Saturn's rings. Something massive just appeared out there, something that wasn't there a second ago, and it's heading toward Earth. Jaiho rushed to the observation window. Through it, she could see Earth floating peacefully in space. But somewhere out there beyond Saturn, something was coming. Something the killer had been preparing humanity for over the past 50 years. The murders weren't just about storing information, Jaiho realized. They were about preparing us. The blueprint killer showed us how to build stronger space stations. The binary butcher gave us advanced computer code. The quantum killer taught us about physics we didn't understand yet. They were teaching us, preparing us for something. Min Seo's neural link beeped with an incoming message. Another body just found on Mars colony. Dr. Eugene Moon, quantum navigation specialist. Same method, stasis pod, wiped mind. Not wiped, Jaiho said again. Rewritten. The killer is writing something in these people's minds, something we need to understand before whatever's coming from Saturn reaches Earth. She turned to the scientists. How long would it take to decode the information stored in these pods if we used every quantum computer in the solar system? The lead scientist did some quick calculations. Maybe 48 hours if we networked them all together. Kaita checked the data from Saturn. Whatever that object is, at its current speed, it will reach Earth in 72 hours. Jaiho looked at the pods, each humming softly with their quantum-encoded secrets. 3 historical killers who weren't really killers at all, but messengers from some unknown future. 4 modern victims whose minds held information humanity desperately needed. And something massive heading toward Earth, something they had less than 3 days to prepare for. Send the pods to the Quantum Computing Center on Lunar Base, she ordered. And get me a ship. We need to find Dr. Moon's body on Mars colony before the killer can finish writing their message. As they rushed to prepare for launch, Jaiho thought about Sun Mai Choi's last message. See you in the stars. It hadn't been a taunt or a threat. It had been a promise. A promise that when humanity finally reached the stars, they would understand why she had done what she did. Now, 50 years later, with something unknown approaching from deep space, that promise was about to be fulfilled. The only question was, would humanity decode the message in time to face whatever was coming? The ship raced toward Mars colony, pushing its engines to their limits. Detective Jaiho Park sat in the pilot's seat, watching the red planet grow larger in her view screen. Behind her, Min Seo Kang and Kita Yoon studied the files about the third historical killer, Jin Woo Park, known as the Quantum Killer. Jin Woo Park killed 3 quantum physicists in 2045. Min Seo read from the old FBI files. He somehow put their bodies in quantum superposition states. They seemed to be in 2 places at once until someone observed them. The FBI never figured out how he did it. And now, Kita added, someone has killed Dr. Eugene Moon, one of the best quantum navigation experts in the solar system. They found her body an hour ago in the Mars Colony Science Lab. Jaiho adjusted their course slightly, shaving a few minutes off their travel time. Every minute counted now. The mysterious object that had appeared in Saturn's rings was still moving toward Earth, and they had less than 70 hours to decode the messages hidden in the victims' minds. Han Bin. Jaiho called through her neural link. What have you found about Jin Woo Park's victims? Han Bin's voice came through clearly despite the distance. All 3 victims were working on quantum teleportation experiments. They were trying to move objects instantly across space. The FBI thought Jin Woo Park was mocking their work by making their bodies appear in two places at once. But looking at it now, he wasn't mocking them, Ji-ho finished. He was showing them something. Just like the blueprint killer showed us future buildings, and the binary butcher showed us future computer code. Their ship's computer beeped with an incoming message from Lunar Base, where scientists were trying to decode the information in the stasis pods. Detective Park, we've managed to decode a small part of the message from the Mercury base pod. Its coordinates, a location in deep space. But it doesn't make sense. There's nothing there. Nothing we can see yet, Ji-ho said quietly. She thought about Jin-woo Park's impossible crimes, about bodies that existed in two places at once, about things that weren't there until you looked for them. The ship landed at Mars Colony with a gentle thud. Security officers met them at the airlock, their faces worried behind their protective helmets. Mars's thin atmosphere required everyone to wear breathing masks when they weren't in sealed buildings. Dr. Moon's body is still in her lab, the head of security told them as they walked through the colony's main tunnel. Just like the others, in a stasis pod, mind wiped clean. But there's something different about this one. They entered the lab, and Ji-ho immediately saw what was different. The stasis pod containing Dr. Moon wasn't just sitting there. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like a light bulb about to burn out. "Don't get too close," Kita warned, holding up a scanner. "The pod is in a quantum state. It exists in multiple places at once. If we try to observe it directly, it might collapse into one state." Ji-ho looked around the lab. Dr. Moon had been working on new ways to navigate ships through space, using quantum mechanics to plot courses through the countless possible paths between planets. Her computers were still running, displays showing complex calculations. "Look at this," Min Seo said, pointing to one screen. Dr. Moon was tracking something just before she died. Something that was quantum tunneling through space-time. Ji-ho moved closer to the screen. The data showed an object moving through space in an impossible way. Not traveling from point A to point B, but existing at all points in between at the same time, only becoming real when observed. That's how they're doing it, she realized. That's how the killer moves through time. They're quantum tunneling through space-time itself. They exist in all times at once until someone observes them. The stasis pod flickered again, and this time Ji-ho saw something in the brief moment. It became solid, symbols appearing on its control screen, just like the other pods. But these symbols were different. "Quick," she told Kita. "Can you record the symbols when the pod becomes visible? We need to see what message is written in Dr. Moon's mind." Kita set up his equipment, pointing special cameras at the pod. Every time it flickered into existence, the cameras captured the symbols on its screen. After 10 minutes, they had enough data to start translating. "Its coordinates again," Min Seo said, looking at the translation. "But not just location coordinates. Time coordinates too. The killer isn't just telling us where to look. They're telling us when to look." Han Bin's voice came urgently through their neural links. "Detective Park. Lunar Base just decoded another part of the message. It's a warning. Something about they travel between the moments, and they see only what observes them." Ji-ho looked at Dr. Moon's quantum navigation calculations again. The doctor had been tracking something that moved through space-time like the killer did. Something that existed in all possible states until observed. Something that had just appeared near Sechin. "The killer isn't working alone," she said slowly. "They're not the only one who can quantum tunnel through time. There are others, the ones coming from Sechin. The ones they've been trying to warn us about." She turned to Min Seo and Kita. "We need to get this pod to Lunar Base with the others. And we need every quantum computer in the solar system working on those messages. Whatever's coming from Sechin, the killer has been preparing us for it for 50 years. As they carefully moved the flickering stasis pod to their ship, Ji-ho thought about the 3 historical killers. Each one had shown humanity something they weren't ready to understand. Future buildings, future computers, future physics. And now, 50 years later, humanity needed all of that knowledge to face what was coming. Detective Park, Han Bin called. There's something else in the FBI files about Jin Woo Park. His last victim was found with a strange note. It said, "When they come, remember, they can only hurt what they can see. The spaces between moments are safe." Jai-ho watched as they secured the pod in their ship's cargo hold. Dr. Moon's body flickered in and out of existence, existing in multiple states at once. Just like the killer, just like whatever was coming from Sechin. The killer wasn't just preparing us, she said. They were teaching us how to hide. How to exist between moments like they do. The stasis pods, the quantum states, they're not just for storing information. They're prototypes for something bigger. Min Seo checked the latest data from Sechin. The object was still coming, growing larger as telescopes got better images. But the images were strange. The object seemed to flicker in and out of existence, just like the stasis pod. How do you fight something that only exists when you look at it? Ki-tae asked. Maybe you don't, Ji-ho answered. Maybe you learn to exist the same way they do. Maybe that's what the killer has been teaching us all along. As their ship lifted off from Mars Colony, carrying its quantum-shifting cargo, Ji-ho sent a message to Lunar Base. Don't just decode the messages. Look for instructions. The killer has spent 50 years teaching us how to survive what's coming. We have less than 3 days to learn everything they've been trying to tell us. The ship accelerated toward Luna, and Ji-ho watched Mars shrink behind them. Somewhere out there, moving through the spaces between moments, was a killer who had murdered people across 50 years of history. Murdered them to preserve the knowledge humanity would need to survive. And now, with something massive and impossible heading toward Earth, they had to decode that knowledge before it was too late. Before the things that traveled between moments reached our solar system. Before humanity had to learn whether they could hide in the spaces between seconds, just as the killer had been teaching them to do. Lunar Base Quantum Computing Center hummed with power as it worked to decode the messages hidden in the victims' minds. Detective Ji-ho Park stood at the observation window, watching Earth hang in the black sky. The mysterious object from Sechin was now visible to the naked eye, a dark shape that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. We've decoded another part of the message, Han Bin said, walking up to join her. He had flown in from ICRB headquarters to help with the final phase of the investigation. It's from Dr. Moon's pod. The quantum state made it easier to read somehow. Jai-ho turned away from the window. Min Seo and Ki-tae were already gathering around a large screen where the decoded message was appearing. The words formed slowly as the quantum computers processed the information stored in the victim's neural patterns. We are you, the message began. We are what humanity becomes when they learn to live between moments. We came back to prepare you because we remember this day, the day they first arrived. Look at this part. Min Seo pointed to another section of text. The killer explains everything. The blueprint killer, the binary butcher, the quantum killer, they were all the same person. A human from the future who learned to quantum tunnel through time. Ki-tae read further down the screen. They say they chose their victims carefully. Each person they killed was someone who would have died anyway in accidents or disasters. They didn't change the past. They just used those deaths to store information humanity would need. But why spread it across 50 years? Han Bin asked. Why not just come to our time and warn us directly? Jai-ho thought about everything they had learned. The buildings designed to withstand impossible forces. The computer codes that worked faster than light. The quantum physics that let people exist in multiple times at once. Because we weren't ready, she said. We needed time to develop the technology to understand their warnings. Each murder taught us something we would need. The killer wasn't just leaving us messages. They were guiding our development, making sure we would have the tools to survive. A scientist rushed into the room, holding a data pad. We finished analyzing the object from Sechin. It's not one thing, It's millions of things, all existing in quantum superposition. They only become solid when we observe them. Just like the killer said, Min-seo remembered. They see only what observes them. The main screen blinked as more decoded text appeared. They are the quantum hunters, the message continued. They feed on possibility, on worlds full of beings that exist in single moments of time. They consume all possible futures, except the ones where their prey learns to exist between moments. Jaiho felt a chill as she understood. That's why the killer was teaching us about quantum states, the stasis pods, the impossible physics. They were showing us how to hide from these things, how to exist in multiple moments at once, just like they do. Detective Park. Another scientist called out. The object, the quantum hunters, they've changed course. They'll reach Earth in less than an hour. Han Bin checked the latest decoded messages. The killer left instructions, plans for something called a temporal diffusion field. It would spread the quantum state effect from the stasis pods across the whole solar system. Can we build it in time? Kita asked. We don't have to, Jiho realized. Look at the designs. The stasis pods aren't just for storing information. Together, they're parts of the field generator. The killer has been building it piece by piece, hiding the parts in plain sight. Min-seo's eyes widened. That's why they needed specific victims in specific places. Mars, Europa, Titan, Mercury. They were positioning the pods across the solar system. Han Bin, Jiho turned to her assistant. Get me every quantum physicist still alive in the solar system. We need them to understand these plans fast. Min-seo, contact every space station and colony. Tell them to prepare for possible quantum state transition. Kita, I need you to coordinate with lunar base security. If this doesn't work, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen if they failed. The quantum hunters would reach Earth, and humanity would face an enemy that existed in all possible moments, except the one where you tried to fight them. The next 40 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Scientists studied the killer's plans. Engineers prepared power systems. Colony leaders got their people ready. And through it all, the dark shape near Sechen grew larger, its flickering form a reminder of what was coming. The pods are all linked, a quantum physicist reported. The field generator is ready. But Detective Park, you need to see this. The final part of the decoded message. Jaiho walked to the screen. The last section of text was appearing. When you activate the field, humanity will enter a quantum state. You will exist in all possible moments at once. Most will not notice. Their minds will perceive time as normal. But you will be safe. The hunters cannot devour what exists between moments. 10 minutes until they reach Earth. Someone called out. Jaiho looked at her team. At Min-seo from Mars Colony, Kita from Europa Station, and Han Bin from Earth. Each of them represented what humanity had become among the stars. And now they had to trust a killer who had murdered people across 50 years of history to save them all. Do it, she ordered. The stasis pods across the solar system activated at once. A wave of quantum possibility spread outward from each one, merging together, creating a field that encompassed all of human space. For a moment, Jiho felt strange, as if she existed everywhere and everywhere at once. Then the quantum hunters arrived. Through the observation window, Jiho watched as millions of dark shapes appeared around Earth. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Forms that existed in all possible configurations until observed, constantly shifting between states of being. But when they tried to focus on humanity, there was nothing solid to find. Every human, every station, every ship now existed in multiple moments simultaneously. They had become like quantum particles, impossible to pin down to a single point in time. The hunters searched for 10 hours, shifting through different quantum states, looking for prey that existed in a single moment. Finding nothing, they finally moved on, their flickering forms disappearing into deep space. As the adrenaline wore off, Ji-ho looked at the final message from the killer again. There was a personal note at the end. Now you understand why we did what we did. The murders, the puzzles, the 50 years of preparation. We had to teach humanity to transcend time before the hunters arrived. We had to help you become what we are, beings who live in the spaces between moments. Detective Park, Han Bin said softly, there's something else. A new message appearing in one of the pods. It's being written right now. The team gathered around the pod. On its small screen, words appeared. The timeline is secure. Humanity survives. We will meet again in the spaces between seconds, where all possibilities live. Until then, look for us in the quantum shadows. We are your future, and now, you are ready to become us. Ji-ho stared at the message, understanding finally coming clear. The killer or killers had been humanity's future self, reaching back through time to ensure their own existence. Every murder had been a necessary step to teach humanity how to survive, how to evolve into beings that could live between moments. As she watched Earth rotate slowly below lunar base, Ji-ho wondered how many versions of herself existed now in the quantum field. How many possible futures lay ahead? And somewhere in those quantum shadows, 3 killers who had outsmarted the FBI waited, not criminals, but teachers who had helped humanity take its next great step into the future. The universe had become a stranger place, but humanity had become stranger too, and in the spaces between moments, they would thrive.